So how much light do you actually need? Especially if you're trying to shoot against something like an open window or a sliding glass door like that goes to your backyard. You know, how much light does it take to overpower the sun, right? And I'd always heard, you know, from YouTube that you should just go out and buy the most powerful light that you can. And I did. At the time I could, and even right now, starting out where I am, the only thing I could afford was a 300 watt light. So I bought a 300 watt light. And I wanted to see, is that light powerful enough to shoot against the sun? And, you know, after knowing how much light it takes, the next question is, how much light actually matters? And we'll get there in a second. I also own a second light. I own a couple, actually. My 300 watt light is a GVM 300 Pro, and my other light is an Amaran P60X. They're both bicolor lights. The Amaran, though, is a panel light, so it's different. And then the GVM is a chip-on-board light, cob light. So the first thing I wanted to do was see where my exposure's at. Where am I just sitting, just kind of at a base level? So I set my camera up next to my couch, which is maybe 3 or 4 feet away from my backyard window. And I got my framing, and then at ISO 800, f-stop 2.8, shutter speed 1/50, because my camera doesn't support 180 degree shutter, I just saw what the exposure was like. And this is shot in S-Log 2. And with a simple Rec 709 conversion, this is what it looks like, right? Everything's blown out. My face is blown out when I turn to the window. And even like the highlights on the front of my face are just gone, right? So the next thing I did was I took an ND filter and I got the exposure where I thought looked nice and sat down again just to see kind of, you know, what does that look like? What is that exposure that I think looks okay in the backyard? And then where am I in terms of exposure in that room? And it's so dark, my camera is struggling to focus. You know, what are you going to do? Next up, I took my Amaran P60 and it's maybe 5 feet away, 6 feet away. It's on full blast with no modifier because I figured that was going to kill a lot of the light. And what I'm looking for in this shot is to wrap some of the light coming from the window around the other side of my face, right? So I want to extend the light from the outside to the front of my face because if you remember, the light originally, when the exposure, you know, with this exposure, is really dark. There's no light on the camera side of my face, right? And so I just wanted to add just a little extra, just a little something extra to this side so you can see me, right? That wasn't doing what I thought was enough. So I went ahead and I just moved the light closer. Still no modifiers. And I think this looks okay. The color temperature is not quite right. I didn't match the color temperature to what it was outside. It was probably like around color temperature of like 6,000 Kelvin with the snow and the sky. This is probably around 5,500. So it looks a little different. I think it's still passable. And honestly, I don't think this looks terrible. It doesn't look too bad. I think there's a little too much light on this side of my face. I wish it would stop a little bit around like right here. But you could get away with this. And that light is, I think, $160 or something like that. It goes on sale pretty frequently. And this looks good. I wanted to see how bright I could get it, though. Could I get myself the same exposure as the outside? I don't know. So because I'm not as familiar with light as I would like to be, I took that light and I turned it around. And with the reflector on, I blasted it into the ceiling. I wanted some bounce light. My ceilings are, I don't know, 10 feet tall, something like that, maybe a little taller. And I blasted it into the opposite wall and ceiling because I wanted that bounce light to come back onto me, wrap around my face, you know, nice, soft, cinematic lighting. That's all I wanted. And it's not doing a whole lot, right? It's not doing a whole lot. So I repositioned the light and shined it again on my face. And again, still not quite doing what I wanted to, right? So what's the next step? Obviously, you take that reflector and you point it right at your own face. And this is what ended up happening when I took my 300 watt light about 6 feet away and pointed it directly into my face. I don't think 100%, this is at 50% right here. I don't think 100% looks very good, but 50% doesn't look terrible. And this is 25, and I don't hate that either. I don't hate the hard light in this look. It's subjective. It's subjective for sure. It can do what I wanted it to do, which was kind of get my exposure up to match or be similar to the background, but I don't think it looks very nice. I put my 33-inch softbox on my light about 6 feet away and turned it on 100% and got not a ton. It's just not enough light. I think there it was double diffused, so maybe that's my problem. So I took one of the diffusion sheets out, and this looks better. It's soft. It's certainly soft, but it's not bright enough. So I moved it closer, and I don't hate that. I think that looks pretty nice. I still feel it's a little too dark and moody. I don't think moody is what I was going for when I had set out to do this, but moody is kind of what I got. I think if I had another light somewhere up here, pretty warm, mimicking like a ceiling light, nice warm ceiling light, that might have brought this together a little more. But what I was focused on here mainly was trying to get a look with just this one light. And then I wanted to check different exposures out. So that's 100%, that's 50%, and I don't think it's enough. So after I did that, I thought, well, okay, this frame is all right, but what I'm missing, I think, is that full wrap around the side of my face. So I want to see the other side of my face. This profile it's not doing a lot for me, right? So what do we see if we go into like a 3/4 profile? And here's where I think that we really got something. This looks, I think, to me personally, and it's going to be subjective to everybody, okay? I understand you have your tastes and I have mine. All right. If you don't think this is good enough and you would do something better, link it, show it to me, paste in the comments. I want to see what you would do to try and raise the level in your room and get a nice, like, wrapped around kind of look from something like this. Would you use bounce? That's something I thought about. It's not something I tried. I have a reflector, but it's not. Maybe it would work. I don't know. I just didn't try it. It crossed my mind, but I just didn't think to put it up. So I like the way this looks. I like the way this looks a lot. I corrected the color of the light, moved it nice and close. That looks phenomenal. I lowered the exposure a little bit to see what that would look like. Cools it off quite a bit. And lowered the exposure even more. I think this is completely off. And even then, I think completely off looks all right. Last thing I wanted to try was just, standing straight in front of the window. What can I get? You'll have to excuse the window decorations. So this is with no light, this is with no light. And then I go to 25%. Click it on from my phone. There's a nice little app, shout out GVM. I see what that can do. Not a ton. It's not really raising the level against me. Raise it to 50. And again, it's not doing a whole ton, but the more this happens though, the more you're able to see the actual silhouette of the light in the background. And as I go to 100 to 100, if I raise the level in camera, I could blow out the whole background. I could overexpose the background, but I just don't think that's what this calls for. I move the light a little closer. It's doing all right. It's doing a little bit. It's doing a little bit, right? Doing just enough. And last but not least, I blind myself. I put the reflector back on and I turn on full blast. You can see the light in the window. And I would even argue this is maybe just a tidbit too hot. This is a 300 watt light at 100%. And it's a little hot, right? The angle's not great, but I'm just looking for exposure. And I think 50% feels pretty good here. I don't hate the way 50% looks. And this is 25%. 25% is a little low. I think 50 was the sweet spot for here. And that looks okay. If I had angled it up and down a little more, I think we'd be in an okay spot. Is 300 watts enough light? For most, except for shooting outdoors, I think 300 watts is more than enough. I think you could get away with 200 or 100 watt lights, depending on what you do. If you're gonna overpower available light, like things from light fixtures, overhead lights, lamps, things like that, you're gonna want something in the 100 to 200 watt range. If you want something powerful that won't break the bank, then you're gonna go for your 300s. If you're gonna start shooting against windows like this and you want bright, soft light, that's when you're gonna start going for your 600 watt lights, your real bright things. And then even beyond that, that's when you can start looking at the things like the Aperture 1200s, 1200Xs, the Aperture 1200X. But how much is really useful, right? Because I'm in here, I'm filming in my basement. I have 2 overhead lights on, they're not super bright. But then right here, I have my Amaran P60. And it's got a softbox on it, but it's sitting at 18%. 18% of total output. My camera here is at f4, ISO 400. That would put me around, if I wanted to match this to that camera, or if I wanted to match this to like an ISO 800 equivalent, if I double the ISO on this, then my f-stop would be sitting at around like 5.6, right? So this is plenty of light. So yeah, how much light is really useful light? Like if you're doing an interview in a room where you can control the lighting and you're gonna shoot at f4, f2.8, things like that, you don't need a ton of light, right? You just need good quality light. And you can get away with a lot. So again, but if that's all you're ever gonna do, then you don't need anything that strong. You can get away with 80 watt and 60 watt lights, right? Just make sure that you're using them correctly and you have good framing and the lights are in a good position and things like that. Because if you have that, then you're gonna make all your shots look like magic, right? I did a bunch of interviews recently using some old GVMs, and then I moved in to help with this Amaran. And I think they mostly, for the most part, despite that I was learning as I was going, I think they look pretty good. Again, is 300 watts enough? Yes and no. It's always going to depend on your use case. And how much light is useful? Again, depends on your use case. Would I want my 300 watt light down here on 1%? Would 1% be too high? Because of my 60 watt light at 18%? I think that this light for its use case right here is the most useful. And I think that my 300 watt light for its use case is the most useful in those situations. So let me know if there's anything I missed, or if there's something I should have tried, or if there's a better way to do what I did with a 300 watt light that you think that would be more efficient. Yeah, leave your comments. I'll reply to everything I can. And go out and shoot, man. Shoot anything. Do what I did. Shoot yourself against your window. Make it nice and silhouette-y. That is my heater that's about to kick on, and it's going to get really loud because this basement is trash. So I'm getting out of here. See ya.